Hi everyone, I'm Allie with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to show you a fun, trendy gift idea for the holiday season. This is a necklace that I made that I've been getting tons of compliments on and wearing a lot. It's a long necklace that's made with chain and a mixture of beads. I have some pearls and some Czech glass on it as well, but it's a great necklace with this little chain created tassel that hangs really nicely when you look at it. It features a nice big stone and features some Czech glass as well. For this project, we're going to use a fair amount of materials, but it's mainly things that you probably have laying around your beading supply. The one thing I'm going to be using that's kind of the focal piece is a rather large bead. This bead here is a piece of labradorite. This one that I'm going to be using is a Mojave turquoise, and it's a diamond shape cut there in the middle. So it's a nice big stone. It's about 30 millimeters. And onto that, I'm going to use some glass pearls, and I just have 4 millimeter glass pearls here. And I also have some Czech glass in 3 millimeter faceted Czech. So for this, in addition to beads, I'm also going to use a bunch of wire. I'm going to be using 20 gauge wire to center my stone. And then after that, I'm going to be using 24 gauge wire. Both wires that I've chosen to use are artistic wire, the Beadalon brand, just because they're nice and flexible. And I'm using a non-tarnished silver for both of those. In the example that I did previously, I did use the gold, the non-tarnished gold color, or non-tarnished brass, I'm sorry. Wire also, we're going to be using some head pins. So these head pins here are some 24 gauge head pins that we're going to be using. You most likely just have them laying around. We're just going to use a couple at the end of our tassel here to hang down some of the beads to kind of draw the whole thing together. In addition to that, I'm using beading wire. I'm using 0.018 and 49 strand, and I'm using the Beadalon wire in just the stainless steel color. I also have here pieces of chain. So this is a great way to use up chain pieces. At the bead store, we have a lot of ends of rolls that were left over with a couple inches, and we're not exactly sure what to do with it. So that's kind of how this tassel necklace came to light. And we're going to be using these pieces of chain. The chain here is about 3 inches long, and I'm going to use this to break down for both my tassel as well as for the bulk of my necklace to pull it all together. This is a fancy etched Italian chain that I'm using here in this silver color, and in this one here I use the brass Italian chain in a Rollo shape. I have a couple crimp beads here, and these are just 2x2 crimp beads, and I'm going to be using those to attach to my beading cable. Tool-wise, I have my bead mat that I'm working on. That's going to grab the ends of my wire as well as keep my beads from rolling around when I'm working on them. I have a needle nose pliers here, which is going to be flat on the inside. I have a round nose pliers, which again has 2 round jaws. And then I have a wire cutters. The wire cutters has flat on one side and it has a V on the other side. It's a flush cut wire cutters, and I'll be using those as well while I'm working with my wire. The other thing that you may want to have handy is a ruler. This is a ruler caliper combo, so it has both that it can kind of measure what I'm working on. But I'm going to be using this ruler in order to help me measure out my chain so that way I get the same amounts in my cut. For the tassel, we are going to be cutting the pieces of chain. For the other portion, we will keep them long and in the 3-inch sections that we have. So for this necklace, that's an example, it's about 30 inches. It slips over my head, and I'm using about 5 lengths of 5 inches of wire. I'm going to be doing my sample necklace just a little bit different because again I'm working with the chain that I have, and this one here I have about 3-inch pieces of chain that I'm working with. As far as Czech glass goes and how much to use and how much you'll need, that's up to you and the chain you're using as far as how long the sections that you're going to use and decorate the chain with those beads. Here in the example, I have about 5 inches of Czech glass on either side of my pendant as I'm working with it. I'm going to do about 4 sections of my Czech glass, and I'm going to be using about 3 inches of each. So I'm using 12 inches altogether of Czech glass. We do sell some of these 3 millimeters in tubes, and that's a great way to purchase this because you're going to use about 3 strands of 3 millimeter Czech glass. So without further ado, we're going to get started. The first thing I'm going to start with is my 20 gauge wire. And I don't need a big piece, which is good because I don't have a big piece left here on my roll. And all I'm going to be doing is straightening that 20 gauge wire out. And then I'm going to pull at my pliers here. And I have about 3.5 inches of 20 gauge wire. The first loop I'm going to make is going to be to attach my tassel of chain to the bottom of my big large bead. I'm going to take my round nose pliers and hold the 20 gauge wire where I can see it in the round nose pliers between, but I can't feel it above those round nose pliers. And all I'm going to do is turn the wire over the top of the round nose pliers and make a loop. So it's going to look a little bit like a shepherd's hook. And what we're going to do is we're going to go back in and we are going to have the round nose pliers there with the tail coming out the middle towards the base. I'm going to then take that wire that's in there and just push the long piece of wire down about 45 degrees. That's going to make a nice eye pin. That eye pin is going to go through my bead. Oh, and I need to straighten out my wire here. If you have some nylon jaw pliers, that's a great use for these, for the pliers as well. And I'm going to put my pendant on and have my nice eye pin there at the bottom. At the top of the bead, I'm also going to make an eye pin. Whether or not you want to do this as a regular eye pin or a coiled eye pin, that's up to you. I'm going to bend the wire right after my bead, go back in with my round nose pliers, as close to the bead as I can get, and that's going to push the wire up a tiny bit. Take the wire over the top of my round nose pliers, and don't overthink this, all you're doing is making a loop. So I'm going to make a loop. If you do have trouble making the eye pins, you can always go back and watch our other YouTube videos on how to make simple eye pins and simple earrings. It's all the same technique. When I go in to cut off this extra wire, I'm going to cut off right inside the loop. It's going to leave a little tiny bit of an opening that I will then close when I attach my chain to it. To do the rest of my base here, I'm going to attach some of the chain at the bottom to be my tassels. When I'm getting ready to attach the tassels, what I can do is see if I have any shorter pieces of chain. Those shorter pieces of chain I can cut to make my tassels. Here on my sample, I have, I believe, 12 pieces of chain. Some of those chain pieces I attached beads to, and some I did leave free and open and I don't have beads attached to the base. That's up to you how you want to do that, and it sometimes will depend on the type of chain that you're using. What I'm going to do to start with is cut my chain into some sections. This doesn't have any rhyme or reason to it. I'm just cutting the chain about the length that I think the tassel should be. So I'm going to cut some of these 3-inch sections apart, remove the broken piece of chain so you don't get it mixed in. And I do want them to be varied, so I do want to keep some bigger and some smaller. I now have 6 pieces cut because I'm cutting each of my little 3-inch piece here into 2. Here's a smaller piece, not quite 3 inches, so I'll cut that in 2. And now I have about 8 pieces of chain. I'm going to push my little scraps off to the side here so they're not in my way. And I'm going to start attaching the chain to the bottom of this eye pin. So I'm at the larger eye pin that I used at the base of the bead, and I'm going to twist that eye pin open a little bit. Whenever you have an eye pin, you don't want to just pull it back open, you're going to twist it open. What that's going to do is keep that loop nice and centered. I'm going to grab my chain and I'm going to start feeding the chain pieces onto my eye pin here and letting them hang down. Again, no rhyme or reason which pieces I'm putting on. It's a tassel. If you want the tassel to match, you can pre-measure all your pieces of chain, but as you can see here, I'm just adding it at random, longer, shorter. Once you're done with that tassel, you can close up that eye pin to keep those tassel pieces in place. So that's going to have my little tassel there that hangs on the end. If you did cut at random like I did and you get done and you say, oh, that's a little bit too long or I need more, you can always go back and add some more pieces. I like the look when it's full and you don't have a lot of extra space around the eye pin. So I'll probably add 1 or 2 more pieces here. You can also add the long pieces of chain and then just cut as you go. That's up to you. You can take a long piece of chain and add it multiple times and then cut at the base instead. So I'll do that for this one here. So I'm going to close that up. I have some here that's looped at the very end. I'm going to cut those loops apart. Take that broken piece off. I should have one more loop there. Okay, now my tassel is nice and full. And you can see that it's all going to lay there at the bottom. And I have lots of places if I want to hang down some of those beads from that tassel. Up here at the top of the pendant, I'm going to start by adding some chain. That chain then I'm going to add my beads to in my beading cable. So to add the beads or the chain here at the top, I'm going to get 2 pieces that are of equal length because I do want my sides to be even if my tassel's not quite. Move these crimp beads out of the way for now. And there are 2 identical pieces of my chain. I'm going to open up this top loop here with my needle nose pliers, slide on that chain, one on each side there, and then I'm going to close this loop up. What I do sometimes at this point too is really close up the loop. You can almost create a coil, and what that will do is also pull that tassel up. Once you have that coiled, you can go in and you can trim down and trim off that extra wire that you don't need. It will open up that loop a little bit, that eye pin. You can just go in and close it up. And there I have the start of my necklace here. So this is going to be the Y piece of the necklace. When I get down to the bottom and I want to add all of my little fringe onto my tassel here, I'll do that at the very end with my head pins. What I'm going to do at this point here is I'm going to take some of my beading cable and I have a big roll here. You're more likely to have a smaller roll. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a nice hunk off of my beading cable. Oh, and it looks like this link here has one more. So if you do notice a little bit of a difference in length of chain, you want to trim the one down. Remove that. At this point I'm going to take my crimp tube and I've cut about 6 inches of beading wire. I'm going to put on a crimp tube and run through my last link of my chain. Run the wire back through the crimp tube and push the crimp tube up towards that chain. If you want to, you can use a crimping pliers. I'm just going to use a needle nose pliers because I have it sitting here, and just do a nice flat crimp, flattening out that crimp tube. I'm going to do this while I'm doing one side. I might as well go ahead and do the other side, and then I can add on to both sides at the same time. So I'm going to cut my beading cable here, grab my crimp tube and do the same thing. Every time for this project that you're adding a crimp tube, you want to make sure that you're connecting on to some wire. So it's similar to a rosary chain in that fashion. You always want to make sure that you're connecting on to something. I'm going to squash down on that wire again. And now it's time for my Czech glass beads. My Czech glass beads, I'm going to pour a little pile out. And they sparkle and shine like crazy. These are a Lake Colorado Topaz AB color. And glass pearl, I'm just using the off-white. I'm going to put one on each at the start. I'm a pearl person and I kind of wear pearls every day and like to put pearls on. So I'm just going to push that down next to my beading cable and down right there to the base. If you can get your first bead over both pieces of wire, that's awesome. Now what I'm going to do is just use my wire and my cable, and I'm going to string on anywhere from 3 to 6 inches of beads. And that length of bead is going to depend on you. It's a good idea with these longer necklaces to hold them up to you and determine exactly where you want them to hang, where you want your beads to start. Like I said, my sample is about 30 inches and it seems to be a great length on me. If you have a little bit of a larger neck, it might hang a little bit short. You may want to go to about 36 inches. Also, you want to make sure that it hits nice on you and it doesn't get lost on you inside of shirts or anything being too short. And I'm going to feed those beads on. So right there's about 2.5 inches of beads. I'm going to keep going till I get about 4 inches of beads, and then I'll show you how to attach to the chain on both sides to continue my necklace. Now that I have an equal number of Czech glass beads on either side, I'm going to go ahead and attach more chain to my project here. So I'm going to put on my crimp tube. After that, I'm going to pick a new piece of chain. I'm going to put that on. I'm going to run the wire back through the crimp tube, and at the same time I'm going to run it back through a couple beads. Push that wire down. And I don't want to see a lot of space in between here, but I do want it to be able to move just a tiny bit. I don't want it to be too stiff. Once you have that nice and just a little bit of wire showing, you don't want that crimp tube rubbing against your wire. You're going to squash down with your needle nose pliers and then cut off the extra wire with your wire cutters. I'm going to do the same thing on both sides. So I did make sure that I had the same amount on both sides of wire, and I'm attaching to the same size of chain on either side too. This is a great necklace that if you do have to make a gift for somebody, they're really kind of popular. They're kind of that like boho chic look. You have that nice longer necklace. And the longer necklace is nice too because you don't need to know the actual size of the person that you're giving it to, because it really anywhere after 30 inches is going to hit and look pretty as you're wearing them. So here I have the start of my piece here with my bead at the bottom. I have my pieces of chain attached to my beads. Around the back of the neck, you're going to decide whether or not you want to have chain or whether or not you want to have beads. A lot of time I'll predetermine that by what I have the most of. So I have a lot of beads, so I'm going to go ahead in the back here at the very end, and I'm going to attach about 10 inches of beads so that way I can slip the necklace on. Once I do that, I am going to then come down and add some of these Czech glass and some of the pearls to the bottom of my tassel. When I attach my beads here at the back, it's going to be the same exact style and same exact way. Then I'm going to take one of my crimp tube on some wire and crimp to either side of my necklace. So as I'm making this, I've gotten my beads along the back here of the necklace. If you want to, you can do another section here. And I realized that I had set about the 24 gauge wire, and then I actually didn't use it on this one that I'm making. Where I did use it is on the one that I had made previously. In the back here, I chose to just add one simple little pearl and use that as a link. If I'm just adding one bead, I don't want to use the wire and the crimp beads. It's a nicer look just to use some of the chain. So if I would have added just one bead here and then another link of chain, I would have done that with the 24 gauge wire, much in the same fashion here as making those eye pins. Instead, what I did was just to use the beads along the back, and for the piece of chain in the back, I used beads in the back instead. I did have some 8OC beads in the same color of turquoise that I just added in there for design's sake to get a little bit of another pop of color towards the back of the necklace. What I'm going to do is also bring that pop of color in at the base too, just to kind of join it together. So I have 3 seed beads that I'm going to use. If you don't have seed beads, you don't need that color. You can use smaller gemstones. That's up to you. I'm also going to take out maybe 4 of my Czech glass beads that I'll play around with, and then a couple of my glass pearls. So again, this is a nice necklace that it's kind of no rhyme or reason, and it doesn't really matter where you put these on the bottom. They're just going to hang from the bottom and enhance that tassel. Here in my pack of head pins, I'm going to open them up, take them out. Head pins, if you haven't worked with them, they come in different gauges and different lengths. For this project, it doesn't really matter what gauge and what length you use. Unless you have really fine pearls, you're going to use about a 24 gauge. I have a 24 gauge head pin here, and it's a 2-inch head pin. I'm going to put on that head pin one of my glass pearls, and I'm going to let that fall to the bottom of that pin. I'm going to preload all my pins here, and that way when I get to the point of turning them all, I'm doing them all at the exact same time. So I'm going to put my pearls here on the bottom of all my head pins, and then I'm going to pick up my Czech glass, and I'm going to put those on the head pins as well. The Czech glass gives a nice shine and color to it. You could use Swarovski crystals if you want to. You could also keep it all natural and just use gemstones for the whole thing. That's up to you. Again, like I said, I'm just going to add that tiny little pop of color there at the bottom by using some of those 8O seed beads. And I use these in the matte opaque turquoise green color to match with that greenish blue little big bead there. So I have all my beads on my head pins. Again, this just kind of saves time to do it all at the same time. And I'm going to move my extra head pins and kind of everything out of the way. At this point, I'm going to be relying heavily on my round nose pliers because I'm going to be making a lot of coiled links. I'm going to pick up a bead, again at random, leave myself about 1/8 of an inch above the bead, and hold with the round nose pliers. Turn my wire back so that it's coming out from the back of my round nose pliers. Go over top of the round nose pliers and make a loop. Switch from the top jaw to the bottom jaw of my pliers, and that loop will be completed. Again, if you have trouble with this, check out our other videos, and I'll be able to kind of walk you through it a little bit slower. Once you have that loop, you're going to slide that loop onto a bottom section of chain and just kind of click that in there to that open loop. If you need to, you can also open up that loop with your flat nose pliers or your needle nose pliers here. And then I'm going to coil the extra wire around the base. When you're looking this up, if you do need a little bit further assistance and help, it's called a coiled eye pin that we're making. I'm going to pick up the beads at random, so I did one of the Czech glass beads first, and now I'm going to do a pearl. Again, making that eye pin there, picking up one of the pieces of chain here towards the bottom, and I want to go the last link of that chain, feed it through that extra wire on my head pin, and then click that wire into the eye of the open eye pin. I'm going to take my pliers and hold and coil that eye pin and cut. So I'm going to continue doing this, picking up the beads at random. As you get it fuller and you have more beads on, you may want to hold up the tassel. It'll start giving you the look as far as where these are going to hang on your actual project. So that way you're not getting all the pearls in one section or all the, you know, Czech glass in one section. You can really get creative with these for the tassel bottom and use all different beads. But I'm going to continue just taking these coiled eye pins and adding them onto my project. You can see I do about 3 coils and then I cut off that extra wire. And I'm just going to keep going, adding those little fringe and beads to the bottom. So I've gotten down the end of my tassels here, and I have all of my beads in place and kind of moving around. If you get done and you're not crazy about the placement of them, you can always open up that eye pin, take some off, shorten them. That's up to you, but I like what I have going on here. And it just gives a nice, fun look to really basic stringing and basic beading techniques that aren't just your average everyday necklace. Again, it's a longer necklace. It's made to be worn long. You can do the tassels short too, but they tend to look really nice when it is longer. It's a nice soft necklace that you see mainly chain, and then you just get those pop of beads as you go higher up the chain to give you that pop of color. It looks really great with some larger gemstone beads and takes kind of the focus away from having so much stone and so much look of the gemstones. It gives a nice lighter chain look. Again, any chain will work for this technique. You can make it as long as you want, as short as you want, and really decorate it up. If you need any supplies to make this wonderful little chain tassel necklace, you can check us out online at PotomacBeads.com. Go to a location near you. If you can't get to one of our locations, you can always shop online, and we'll be happy to ship out any materials that you would need. Thanks a lot for watching. If you get a chance, check out the rest of our YouTube videos, and we'll be able to help you out with fun ideas and fun techniques just like this one. Have a great rest of your day, and happy beading!